Good evening, everybody, or afternoon, morning, depending where you are watching us from. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this webinar. My name is Marta Eichelberger-Jankowska, and I'm representing FODZ, the Foundation for the Preservation of Jewish Heritage in Poland. We are organizing these webinars, which are part of a larger project entitled Virtual Connections to Material Jewish Heritage. This project consists of a website. I will present it during our talk. And it's a public task financed by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Poland with the grant competition Public Diplomacy 2021. Today's webinar is third in the series. It's the last one in the series. It's entitled Synagogues, the State of Preservation and Future Prospects and Possible Approaches. What I would like to do is, first of all, invite and present to you our speakers, who each of them, we have 4 speakers today, are true experts in Jewish heritage preservation, not only in Poland. So as you can see, there's Ruth Ellen Gruber with us, who is the author, who has researched and written widely on Jewish heritage for more than 3 decades, who also manages the website Jewish Heritage Europe, and who is recipient of many awards, including Guggenheim Fellowship and many others, as you probably have read also in our in the registration link when you signed up for this meeting. Natalia Romik will speak today, and she's a graduate in political science, practitioner of architecture, designer, and artist. She also is an architect who was awarded a PhD at the Bartlett School of Architecture at UCL, University College London, for a thesis, Post-Jewish Architecture of Memory within former Eastern European shtetls. She also is a recipient of numerous grants and author of projects of which she will speak to you today as well. Further, we have Witold Wrzosiński, who is a graduate of Hebrew Studies at Warsaw University and the director of the Okopowa Jewish Cemetery in Warsaw, and also runs a foundation for documentation for Jewish cemeteries. And he will also speak more about that today. Piotr Puchta, diplomat, and currently also CEO, director of our Foundation for the Preservation of Jewish Heritage in Poland. The foundation's primary mission is to protect and commemorate the country's surviving heritage sites, among them synagogues, cemeteries, and mikvehs, as well as monuments to Jewish cultural heritage. So thank you, welcome. Without further ado, I would like to turn to Ruth with our first question to introduce us to the state of preservation currently in Poland of Jewish heritage. What is your assessment? And what are the factors that influence the state of preservation today?
Thanks, Marta. I'm really glad to be here and glad to be with these other wonderful people. I think I just want to look back for a moment. Poland, looms large in Jewish memory and in Jewish identity, because most of the Jews who live in North America anyway trace their ancestry back to Polish lands. So this is the Jewish heartland. I lived in Warsaw 40 years ago as a journalist covering Solidarność and then martial law. At that time, there was almost no one interested in Jewish heritage whatsoever. It was something that was totally forgotten, neglected. There were a few people, and I met them. Monika Krajewska, Staszek Krajewski, Jan Jagielski. But they were the ones who were doing things on their own to try to discover or rediscover. They talked about the Jewish civilization of Poland, like Atlantis, something that vanished overnight in the blink of an eye, and a continent like that vanished, a civilization that vanished, only leaving a few vestiges that were neglected, forgotten, needed to be discovered. That was the status then. Monika's book, Time of Stones, was really the first one on Jewish heritage that was published in Poland after the war, I think. It came out in 1982 or 1983. And I always remember in that book, the poet Anna Kamieńska is quoted talking about the cemeteries, the Jewish cemeteries in Poland, often ruined, often forgotten, overgrown, destroyed, talking about them as a tribe of stones. They have a message. They send a message. They send a message about a people. So this has sort of underlain all of my subsequent activities in the Jewish heritage field, which started about a decade later after the political changes, because I was persona non grata for 7 years and couldn't come back until after the changes. And someone says he can't hear, so I'll try to talk louder. But anyway, I started my work in Poland in 1990, trying to see what was there. And I remember going to, because I was, covering as a journalist what was going on in Poland in 1990. I remember, though, going out and seeing my first former synagogue in Kosowlacki. It was a flour mill or something like that. Standing there, I somehow was told that it was a former synagogue, but it had no indication that it was such. And this was the way most Jewish heritage sites were in Poland. Since then, over the decades, the situation has changed a lot. And there have been restorations. There has been, a great activity by individuals on the grassroots level, also the institutional level. But in Poland, unfortunately, there was never like a coherent strategy of what to do with Jewish heritage sites, the synagogues, the cemeteries, like this. There was never a list drawn up of what the most important synagogues were, what the focus should be on preservation, importance meaning architectural importance or importance historically or whatever. And it's only in recent years, and I must say very recent years, that these strategic lists and strategic activities and attempts to coordinate activities and to connect people who are doing this type of work has been taking place. And I think, unfortunately, it's a little late. It's difficult. A lot of what went on in Poland was a one-off restorations, one-off projects. Some of the projects are wonderful, and need to be praised, need to be seen. But there was this lack of coordinated strategy or strategic thinking nationally or even regionally in the Jewish heritage field that I think Poland is a bit paying the price for it now. And there's a lot of catching up to do. Mm-hmm. I mean, I could go on about this, but that's I think that's the status now. And I think, FODZ, with your project that you just have now, with the virtual connections, this coalition of guardians of cemeteries that's been started, the leaders of dialogue, things like this are working now to make connections and to create strategies. And I think this is really important, but I wish it had happened, 10 or 20, 25 years ago. Now it's a bit playing catch up.
And Ruth, just to elaborate a little bit further, you have spoken of historic synagogues in Poland and in Europe in general as survivors. And I wanted to ask you to speak a little more to what you mean by that. and their role in teaching history in general?
Well, I think, you know, these are tangible connections with the pre-Holocaust past, and it's very important. The generation of human survivors, of people who lived through the Holocaust, who remember. I think most Holocaust survivors today were children during the Holocaust, so most of them can't remember very well the world before the Holocaust. But the physical Jewish heritage sites that remain, the synagogues that are often still maintain beautiful architecture, beautiful interior painting, they remember, they are physical, tangible connections with that world that existed, because it was a huge world. And I think, you know, people sometimes learn more about how Jews were killed and how Jews were brutalized during the Holocaust, but they don't learn enough about what was lost besides people. They don't learn that much or appreciate that much the Jewish civilization that existed before the war. And these surviving buildings, they are survivors. They are like what I call symbolic mezuzot. They mark towns, villages, roadways, cities, entire countries as places where Jews lived, died, loved, laughed, cried, had farms, worked in factories, whatever, before the Holocaust, and don't live there, love there anymore. And I think it's really important to use them as such, and they can be anchors to teach about that period and teach about that world and teach about then the Holocaust. And I think, you know, even the way that some buildings can be restored can show that. There are some synagogues, many synagogues that have been restore the synagogue to sort of pristine, beautiful condition, the way they were beforehand. But a number of synagogues have taken the road to preserve evidence of the damage that these buildings went through during the Shoah or afterwards, because a lot of buildings were like trashed after or converted into other uses after the Holocaust. A lot of, you know, some synagogues have retained the evidence of this traumatic history, and that also is a way to teach about the history both before, during, and after the war. So I think they're very important. And of course, cemeteries are like textbooks about people and places and lives, and they're extremely important places where you can learn about people and learn about their death, but not only their Holocaust death, not only the brutal death, but natural death.
Thank you, Ruth. Thank you very much. I'd like to, as we speak of these buildings and their potential, the ways in which they're preserved and revitalized in some cases, I'd like to present to you the website and some of the tours of the synagogues, just to present you with examples of preservation. So for example, we have a very true gem of Baroque architecture in Witold. Just, that's not, doesn't want to open once more, okay. So we can take here a tour of either the synagogue or the cemetery, or rather a fragment of cemetery, which I'll show later. And in case of Witold, you can see a synagogue which was not really revitalized, wasn't really renovated. It's relatively well preserved, though still very much in danger, and needs to undergo procedures, and especially drying up the moist from the foundation. But you can see it's pretty much stable, the building, and beautiful decorations and polychromies and prayers that you can read on the walls. And you have also names of members of the community who supported the synagogue. So this is one of the cases. And this serves mostly as a, not even museum, but rather a synagogue which can be viewed. You can take a tour, physical, not just virtual tour, but also physical tour of the synagogue. So this is one example of what these places look like, though it's pretty unique. We have Zamość, which the Foundation for the Preservation of Jewish Heritage in Poland managed to find funds and revitalize years ago. And it's right now in really a good condition. And not only it was it revitalized, it's serving also the local population as a cultural center, an educational center in which there are art exhibits and concerts and lectures, and a lot of them on Jewish history and Jewish culture, but also on ecology and other minorities in the region. And yeah, ethnic minorities, but also LGBTQ. A whole variety of subjects can be learned about. And this is also a beautiful building, and you can see completely how different it also is. And interestingly, even it's on the Hasidic route that that we have as a foundation, and it's in the region which was very much populated by many Hasidim before the war. This was a reformed synagogue, which was actually at war with Hasidic population of the town. So just an interesting tidbit. And yeah, and it was of course built as a Sephardic synagogue initially, because Zamość also is a fascinating place, as I think the only such location in Poland which had a large Sephardic community, which later, due to the fact that most of Poland was Ashkenazi, very much embraced Yiddish culture and Yiddish language. And most famous, I think, figure, writer from the town is Yitzhak Leibush Peretz, Yudlamet Peretz, the greatest, first such a big Yiddish writer. So these are two examples. One place that is relatively decently preserved, but needs more help, definitely, and is more of a museum, a site to visit. Zamość, which functions as a cultural center of our foundation, and another place I wanted to present you with is pre-funeral house in Olsztyn Betachara, which belongs to our foundation, but was leased out. It was leased out to revitalization of the place. It's also in a good condition. You will see it very soon. And also lectures on many topics, including Jewish culture, happen there, and also events. So that's another way of revitalization and adapting it also to the needs of the local current population. While it's serving as the cultural center, it also is well taken care of, so visitors can come and enjoy the building, which was designed by a very famous architect, Eric Mendelssohn. And the last case I wanted to show you, just to compare, is let's take maybe Krasnik synagogue, which also FODZ, the Foundation for Preservation of Jewish Heritage, did some renovation work to ensure the stability of this structure. Nonetheless, as you will see, it also, in order to serve as any building, whether it's a cultural center or anything else, it would have to undergo a lot of work. And this is a case of a synagogue that we're fighting to preserve, basically. There are others in worse conditions, and some that still could be hopefully serving and could be saved and serve a purpose, but they need a quick reaction, definitely. And so with this, I would like to end this very short preservation. You can go to our site, the project site, and look yourself, explore these tours. We encourage you to do so. And I would like to ask Natalia Romik to continue talking about this very subject of revitalization and purposes. What are the best ways? What are the options? Thanks.
Thank you, Marta. To fit in a 15 minutes, I'm gonna to read and also showing to you a few slides. And Marta asked me also to share my artistic and architecture practice with you related to the broadly understood Jewish heritage. However, I would like to start with a general remark. We must remember that after the war and after the Holocaust, Polish society did not have a chance to publicly discuss the major transformation in our society. In Poland and in Ukraine also note there was no honest really discussion about the post-war appropriation of the Jewish buildings by Poles and Ukrainians, especially in the former shtetls. For example, private workshops, dwellings, and communal Jewish buildings, and as well as synagogues. This problem was ignored by late public and experts alike, was not discussed by architects, Union of the Polish Architects, town planners, and as well not by designers. So open debate is very necessary to tackle the problem of post-Jewish architecture, and especially in the small towns. So thank you for the invitation, and I will share my screen. So now I would like to present to you my architecture and artistic practice that copes with the problems of urban emptiness and the spectral practice of post-Jewish properties. Chmielnik. Chmielnik is a very complex and also fascinating project in which I started my shtetl research. Before the Second World War in the Chmielnik, Jews constituted more or less 80% of population. After the war, synagogue was used as a granary. However, the urban tissue in Chmielnik remains almost intact. The renovation of the synagogue was commissioned by the mayor of the city, Mr. Zatorski, to reconstruct the former Jewish life as a tourist attraction. So this architectural and interior design project for a shtetl museum, Świętokrzyskie, which is a region museum in the walls of the 18th century synagogue, combined with the comprehensive revitalization of the old building. So this museum had an education character and also exhibition about the history of the shtetls. We have here also small place for a theater, workshop room, for a small cinema. But what is very important, as you can see to the right on the top in the plan, in the heart of the synagogue is devoted into the Jewish history of this region. Bima, actually, the most important heart of this place, as we know formerly the place to read the Torah, was my first experiment with the creation of the architectural memory. The bima is constructed entirely from the glass, and the project was carried out through the architectural studio, which I was working for 7 years, Nizio Design International. What was very important to say, with Jan Jagielski almost 10 years ago, we found exactly the picture of the bima from the 30s. But then I really thought it would be unethical to build the bima how it was before the war. So that was also the sculpture of the memory for this community. There is not longer there in Chmielnik, because we should remember there is no Jewish people now in Chmielnik. And the bima is also not only the sculpture, is a place how the people gather, sing, and I think it's something more than a bima right now. And here you can see the different approach of the bima and the place where supposed to be Aron HaKodesh. We cannot find an exact picture of the Aron. That's why it's only like a very delicate piece of glass. So my question about conjunction and the blocking of the memory and the oblivion in the small towns. In other words, how we can restore the Jewish legacy of former shtetl, and the question how the architecture memory and its conversion into really something new can change the elements of the quality and the contemporary life in through also public experiments in abandoned architecture, because the bima was an experiment, which I was really, really happy that the local population and the mayor, who is not any longer the mayor, in Chmielnik, they were so supportive. And this beautiful bima, 2 tons bima, it's you can go to Chmielnik, you are very welcome. So my first practical response of this above mentioned question about the blocking of the memory and what does it mean Jewish heritage for us was the project Yad. Yad was a platform of urban protest, experimental intervention, which I have done together with the Brama Zuckermana Foundation. Yad, as we know, in Hebrew means a word hand, is a name taken from the Judaic tradition where it serves as a liturgical tool. So this root with the miniature of the hand. This performance, as you can see also here down below, this is the architectural sketch made by Sebastian Kucharuk. I was thinking how to build a big hand and roll into different cities and also share with the local population, not only what I found in a Jewish Historical Institute with Jan Jagielski, but also how we can collect the memoir, letters, sometimes painting from the local population. Mm. So here you can see the Yad in the larger scale. This performance, as is written here, target the problems of compulsive urban management in terms of untaking decision regarding derelict and forgotten post-Jewish architecture within the post-communist urban reality. There are the pictures of the Yad, which we roll together with Brama Zuckermana and with the local people in the street, for example, here in Ebędzin. So the mirrors were very important in this performance because there was not only optical reflection, but also the sign of the urban emergency. But was what Ellen said at the beginning, the architecture is not waiting, it's like full of erosion. And this is the picture in the front of Ruth Kalaskier house, so-called Polish Anna Frank, the girl who was reading the testimony during the Holocaust. And the Yad was placed in the different museums of modern art, different galleries. And it is very important to say this warning triangles. Here you can see the picture. There was a description of the Jewish building that will be destroyed, eroded, or we still know the function of the building, but nobody is really taking care. So after this performance, we founded the Senna Collective, and we thought, like, let's roll the Yad further and let's think collectively about interdisciplinary revitalization. So this is the project, the After Yad, we start to work together as a Senna Collective. Gliwice is not technically the shtetl, but because it's Upper Silesia, formerly before the Second World War Germany. However, the problems of adaptation are very, very similar. So the project was commissioned by the museum in Gliwice to convert abandoned pre-funeral house, Beit Tahara, into the Museum of Upper Silesian Jews. So the pre-funeral house was built in a new Jewish cemetery in 1903 by the very famous Vienna architect Max Fleischer. in a neo-Gothic style. After the Second World War, the building was used as a habitat for humans, but also as a pig farm, unfortunately. So the history of the Silesian Jews is still taboo in a Polish historiographical museum because related to the German history and also to related with the Jewishness. Here you can see in the plan on the left side, there is located right now exhibition about the history of Silesian Jews, and also responding to the needs of the local NGOs. In the West Wing is located educational center for children, and with a beautiful small kitchen, library, and also coffee place. So this is a picture from virtual shtetl from the 1903. And this is the kindergarten called Witold Club. And also the main chamber house before revitalization. So the main chamber have a double function. Right now it's a concert and small theater. And previously in the main chamber, the corpses of the deceased were washed. So the function, actually the old function was very strong. And our idea was actually to provide the installation inside the main chamber called the cloud, which will work as an aesthetic element and symbolizing the temporalness of the existence, but also supporting the structure of information about the funeral rites in Judaism, but also very nice source of the lighting in the room. So the cloud is not built yet, and I hope that will happen in the next 2 years. So you can see the view from the entry to the cemetery. And some pictures from the revitalization that was made 3 years ago. And the Magen David and the main chamber exactly displays with the cloud after the revitalization. And the main lobby with a description, history of the buildings, history of the Max Fleischer, and also the history of the cemetery, because we have like 2 cemeteries, and Gliwice, this is a new cemetery. And the heart of the core exhibition called Synagogues in Upper Silesia is actually like the main central point of the core exhibition. And the exhibition was nominated a year ago for a European Museum of the Year, which was like really, really big success for us because we are even not the company. Because this performance, Yad, from one side, generated such a lot of a different and very interesting result. My plan also during my PhD in London was to expand the concept through the project Nomadic Shtetl Archive, and then adapt also to the other buildings. So this is like some picture from the workshop here in my great friend Sebastian Kucharu courtyard. So the Nomadic Shtetl Archive was a piece again of a mobile architecture, which traveled in a southeastern Poland and following footprints of the former Jewish towns and exploring the layers of the urban memory. The design, the archive was built at a mobile trailer, as you can see in the previous slide, and the unit was equipped with the independent light system as well. The main aim actually to use the mirrors here again was to disappear and also merge in the shtetl landscape and to emphasize the importance of what was exhibited inside. And the project was made together with Brama Grodzka and my dear friend Emil Majuk. And the archive contains a small library, its core books, and everything what we found with Jan Jagielski inside the Jewish Historical Institute in Warsaw. So in the front of the archive, we carried discussion workshops, mostly about Jewish heritage in their town. Here is a picture from the Kotsk. So that was our trip. So the inhabitants were not only passively absorbing documents, but play a very important role of the co-researchers. Co-researchers in the way that they help us to find the new materials. fill the archival gaps, locate the original buildings. And as well, we talked about the very difficult subject, like problems of privatization, lack of the social knowledge about the history of their own shtetl. And because I think I have a last 3 or 4 minutes, I will focus on the few towns. Bychawa before the Second World War, 66% of the Jewish population. And during the one of the conversation about localization on the mikveh, somebody brought to me documents of the Jewish popul found in the attic of the one of the Bychawa house during the renovation. In every town, we have also performances and the walks to the synagogues. Here, thanks to the courtesy of Antoni Wierciorkiewicz, a private owner of the synagogue in Bychawa, we have a chance to explore beautiful interior that is still possible to spot traces of the polychromics and also featuring music instruments. So the synagogue was sold to Wieczorkiewicz in 2007 by Foundation of the Preservation of Jewish Heritage. And in spite of many questions in the future of the synagogue, he is not giving any answer. So the synagogue is actually his shop, but he's very open to the local people in the area of Bychawa and Lubelszczyzna region. So this is like quite iconic question for me, like what we can do and how we can help to preserve this synagogue, not only elevation, but how we can think collectively about the maybe new function, although it's a private synagogue. We are moving now to Józefów, a very beautiful city. It's one of the most beautiful revitalization of the synagogue turned into the library. And it is very important to underline that the people are very connected with the synagogue. Inside is a library. It's also like a small bookshop. And maybe it's like my question for us also today, if the synagogue stayed in a hand of the city, it's not privatized. I think it's much easier to control what is happening inside, and the people are much straight connected with the building, with the heart of the building. And an archive was still there, so we have like a lot of event inside, and some of the people were really not aware that they are living in a Jewish houses and they are using Jewish workshops. Kraśnik will be our last city. Together here with the historian Mariusz Bienik, we went to see Grand Synagogue. It's under the custody of the Foundation for the Preservation of Jewish Heritage. It's very beautiful elevation. And especially for kids who were like spending really hours inside of the archive, that was actually first opportunity to really visit the buildings. So we were really astonished of the paintings and the tables of law. And here you can see also how archive operated, how the people gathered together, and how the synagogue is very, very important for the local people. So such interventions like Yad and Nomadic Shtetl Archive, I think need to overcome the general neglect of the post-Jewish properties related to the factors like lack of the historical awareness, restitution, lack of the coherent heritage policy in Poland and also in Ukraine. I think is a more general problem, but not only by the Polish authorities, but also by the Jewish organization. So like now, another we really need a discussion about the Jewish heritage. And I think I fit into the 15 minutes with the two abandoned projects like Chmielnik and Gliwice, and to art-related project like Nomadic Archive and Yad. Thank you very much. And I will stop the share my screen.
Thank you, Natalia. This was very enlightening. I would like to maybe just to explore this a little further. I think everybody noticed, and I will let Ruth speak in a minute, that I don't think there was one synagogue that was revitalized as a synagogue as a ritualistic, for its ritualistic purposes. And it's worth I think, to mention that except for Warsaw, Kraków, Wrocław, Łódź, there are no big, there are no communities, no Jewish communities that could potentially use these synagogues as synagogues. And this is another question: how to revitalize them, how to meet the needs, on one hand, of the population, the locals that, as Natalia mentioned, are living there and want to have a chance to connect to this heritage and explore its role in their towns. Also, for the visitors and descendants of Jews who live there in places like Kraśnik, Nasielsk, and so on, for them to visit. And if we want to have these places to visit, there need to be some ideas for solving this, and these buildings have to serve probably another function than its ritualistic one. And yes, Ruth, you want to speak? So I'm giving you the voice.
I just want to take issue with Natalia for a moment. Maybe it's semantics, but you referred to post-Jewish architecture, and it's not post-Jewish architecture. This is Jewish architecture. These are post-Jewish places. They are post-Jewish towns, post-Jewish villages, even post-Jewish cities. But a synagogue is not post-Jewish architecture. It's Jewish architecture in a post-Jewish place. And I think that's something important to remember. And also in the development of your ideas and your projects, this is Jewish architecture. In post-Jewish places. There are no Jews living in these places, but the Jews created these buildings. And I think that's something important to remember.
Thank you. Thank you, Ruth. And maybe you would like to add something also of the projects, as I was mentioning, relating also to Natalia's ideas, those projects that kind of meet the needs of both the descendants and the local population. Are you aware of some projects that are worthy to mention, to recommend as models?
Well, there are many projects that descendants are quite involved sometimes with restoring Jewish cemeteries. But I think in your last webinar with Glenn, it was an example of how descendants can be involved in engaging local people. It was it's only recently that descendants felt that they could come to Poland and actually do something. 30 years ago, nobody wanted to come to Poland. It was considered to be a graveyard and nothing worth dealing with. It was very difficult to find financing. It was difficult to find people who were willing to do things. But that's changed to some extent. But judging by the comments on Facebook posts where you say anything positive about Jewish heritage development in Poland, there's still a lot of people out there and a lot of descendants out there who still don't want to have anything to do with Poland and don't trust anything in Poland, which I think is in the Jewish sphere, it's a mistake. I mean, there's a lot going on in Poland now, and a lot of really goodwill going on in Poland. But you even see it in journalism where, there's always, I think I read an article recently just now about, some heritage activist where a descendant is, he was getting an award and a descendant is contesting or protesting or criticizing the award because he does. There's a lot of distrust still about anything that goes on in Poland. Yeah. But I think that the projects like Natalia's doing and like FODZ is doing, like many, many other people are doing, are very, very important. And I think it's worthy to remember that grassroots individuals and organizations are doing fantastic job in Poland. They're filling big gaps. And I think they need to be supported. And they are Each year there are awards given out honoring non-Jewish Poles who preserve and protect Jewish heritage. And I think the numbers now are well into the hundreds of people who have received awards for doing this. And it's very important to know this. And I think descendants, I saw that Dan Oren is on this call, on this webinar, and I think he's also galvanizing descendants to get involved, as are other people.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you, Ruth.
And maybe one thing with the post-Jewish is actually, I will send you, Ruth, an article of mine about the post in the brackets, because it's like the post is, it's very political post. What does it mean, Jewish architecture? How, what does it mean, Ukraine and the Jewish architecture? So the post is like in the brackets. Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying.
But again, it's the post-Jewish place, Jewish architecture in a post-Jewish place, or the architecture of Jews in a post-Jewish place is what I think it is. I wouldn't call it, even in brackets, maybe post-Jewish architecture of a post-Jewish place. Not the architecture.
I think we will continue this, but
yes, I think we will. I look forward to
tomorrow.
Yeah, we mentioned also right before starting that this webinar could last for at least 4 hours, but we have only an hour 15 minutes. So I want to relate to these places, to speak of these places a little bit, elaborating on what you both mentioned as perhaps, first of all, meeting places, as places that are important to some of the local population and descendants. And as in the case of Nasielsk, as Glenn was speaking of the cemetery there and memorial, they become an occasion for dialogue, for a meeting, for healing, for transformations, for learning about one's past, and not just the Holocaust past, but also before the Holocaust, as we've mentioned earlier. And Ruth spoke about the pre-Shoah history that these buildings and sites are sort of portals to. And so I want to ask now Witold to speak a little bit about cemeteries as such places, meeting places. What is also going on, what is the preservation and their state right now, and who gets involved in renovation? And while you'll be speaking, I also show those short, very small bits of virtual tours that we have of cemeteries in Witold and Przysłucha, which are actually showing the Ohalim of the Tzaddikim, of the famous Tzaddikim. So thank you.
Sure,
yes.
Thank you. I just have one question. Can you hear me?
I can.
Good. Okay, so thank you for inviting me. I'm honored to be a part of this webinar. As I understand, I am here as a representative of a kind of a parallel universe to synagogues. There are similarities, but there are a lot of differences. The main difference between synagogues and cemeteries is that cemeteries have to remain cemeteries. I mean, they cannot be turned into something that is, let's say, a bit more useful or familiar to the local population. So even if there are no Jews at all left in a town, the renovation of a Jewish cemetery has to ensure that it stays as a Jewish cemetery and nothing else. So the natural approach of locals is often naturally as they perceive it as a foreign territory. But this has been changing lately, and the universe of Jewish cemeteries is vast, and it spans from some of the largest European Jewish cemeteries in Warsaw or Łódź, which are still active, still being used, which have impressive mausoleums of incredibly wealthy families, to neglected plots of land, overgrown and not really displaying any stones anymore, to even worse, places that have been overtaken and built over with supermarkets, discos, or stadiums or bus parkings, which makes it very difficult to develop a coherent approach to all of them at once, or basically just impossible. As Ruth said, we're playing catch up. It's impossible to deny this, and this was the main impulse behind our idea to establish something that we call the Foundation for the Documentation of Jewish Cemeteries. The idea was that as those stones are practically falling apart right now in front of our eyes, we can at least save the information, the genealogical information, the names of those people, and make them as available online. We thought that was the only thing we could save. It was in 2006. Things have changed, and on one hand, it's true we are playing catch up, and the first pioneers like Janek Jagielski or the Krajewskis began only in the 80s. Not much happened with the Jewish cemetery before that. After the war, only neglect and looting and other kinds of damage. But on the other hand, this allowed us to see more clearly what can be working and what really isn't. Grassroots initiatives seem to be very effective, but with one condition. It had to be done the way some people started doing it, just by being present. And I mean, people like Marla Rauker Osborne, that I guess we all know, but also less active people, less active on Facebook, like Myrna Tech in Gonions, or Hattie Bleher in Przerośl. These are all people who just started doing something with the cemeteries without really waiting for anything, without asking anybody, without even reaching out to local people. They just started coming there, regardless of what those places looked like. They just started coming there, returning and returning and returning, and sooner or later, people became interested. Because, you know, these are small towns. People from America or Israel or Australia are coming each year to this little neglected piece of land, and for people who live there, it's not that easy to understand what was going on. So in all of those places that I mentioned, the process began with those people being present there and doing some hard work, cutting down weeds or putting up stones or whatever, just trying to renovate, just doing hard work. And local people started joining in. Local intelligentsia started joining in, librarians and educated people, and then mayors, and something was working. And I don't think I've seen different approaches that worked that well. And now it's well, right now I'm a member of this, that also Ruth was kind enough to mention, the Coalition of Guardians of Cemeteries. This is just a beginning, but the idea behind that was that there are so many grassroots ideas, initiatives like that taking place in many smaller towns in Poland, all over Poland, with Jewish cemeteries, with local people coming there, teachers with students, and whoever else wants to, just coming there and doing something about the place, because it is where they live, and they wanted to look nice, even if some of the people feel that it's in a way foreign because they cannot even read what those stones say. They don't know anybody buried there. Maybe their grandparents did, but it's been a long time ago. But it's their place, it's their town, this is the area. I know of one example where local football club, well, let's call them hooligans, radical fans, decided to clean up a Jewish cemetery because they wanted to be proud of the place where they live in. They wanted it to look nice. They wanted to everything to be in order, and so they did it just by themselves. It wasn't in Małogorz, it was somewhere near Kielce, and this is something new. So the coalition was established with the idea that maybe there is a way to try and connect, to create a network, because most of those people have no idea about anybody else doing something like this anywhere else. So the idea was to create a coalition so that they can share experience, so that they can learn what is, let's say, forbidden by the Jewish law and accepted by the Jewish cemetery law. That it's not always obvious. So it's good to educate those, and they want this knowledge. They want to know what they can do. Sometimes they want to learn the alphabet, to be able to document the cemetery themselves. But the most important thing is that that way they have an infrastructure they can go to with problems, that provides them with, sometimes with funds, although that's not always what is really needed, sometimes with volunteers from a school that is nearby, but there's just a connection that has to be made and nothing else. Sometimes with political power, if there is a mayor who is reluctant to have people engaged in an activity like this, it's possible to bring somebody who is superior to him, to convince him, and those people who start those grassroots initiatives don't really have this political power, but the coalition has. And last 2 years were very successful. Were much more successful than I expected. I'm not the one who is running the coalition. This is Michał Laszkowski. I'm just in the board. He's a head of the Foundation for Cultural Heritage. And I admit, at first I thought he was naive, but it seems he wasn't. It seems that actually things are going the right way. I'm not sure what kind of an example it can set as far as synagogues go. It is different. On the other hand, there is something inspiring about local people that are beginning to perceive this piece of heritage as their heritage. They're complicated, complex, more complex heritage than it had been believed before. Maybe also more interesting that way. Maybe even attractive to people coming from the outside. Maybe attractive touristically, although that's not always, usually not the main goal. But it's becoming, in many cases, something to be proud of instead of something that we pretend doesn't exist. So that way, I think it can be inspiring as far as synagogues go, and also the fact that okay, I'm coming to the end of what I'm saying, but I just want to say that for the last 2 years we had the COVID. Well, everybody knows what we had, but what I mean is that people stopped coming, including Hati Blecher, including Myrna, including even Marla, people who even began to live near those places that they wanted to care about. People who came every year, and it became a tradition. They had to stop coming, and they were terrified. They kept asking me to check, to see what's going on, and it turned out that people continued. Nobody was waiting. Nobody waited for them to come again. In all those places, people still worked, went to the Jewish cemetery. They got the reflex to go there, to cut down trees, to move around a bit, because it's also a nice opportunity to just have some physical activity. And with COVID, everybody was locked at their home, so people actually waited for an opportunity to go to the Jewish cemetery, spend some time in in nature, and work a bit. And mayors and everybody who was involved, who had been involved before, remained involved, even without any kind of encouragement. So it's looking better than ever. I still have my reservations, but I have to admit, in 2006, I would be the last person on earth probably to say that something like this is possible. But it's happening. It's happening, and this year the coalition organized volunteer efforts with actually tens or dozens of thousands of people participating all around the country. Over 40 cemeteries, no, maybe even more. I don't have the numbers. The numbers are impressive. There is a website, well, yeah. It seems there's hope. That's my message. So maybe there's also hope for synagogues if you find a way to involve local people, and if you find a way to establish an umbrella organization that encourages them and doesn't really prevent them from doing stuff. That's it.
Thank you, Vitek. I think one of the things that are very, very important, Natalia, I'll let you speak in a minute, is that thing you were saying about transformation of understanding of these sites and cemeteries being part of Polish heritage, being part of Poland, and vice versa also for Jewish descendants to reclaim that connection to the Polish land of ancestors and people that live here. So that's very transformational and also needed connection, I believe. So, and in order to save this heritage, we need collaboration, as you meant, inter-organizational, but also perhaps international. And yes, Vitek.
I can only say that I've seen wonderful things. I've seen people from all around the world in Przerośl being invited to a local house for pancakes with raspberries from the orchard of the people who own the house, and on a sunny day, and that in itself changed my own approach to this whole idea. It seems it can be effective and beautiful, and everybody can feel they belong somewhere, to a group of people, to a place, to at least a nice sunny day. So yeah.
Thank you, Vitek. I would like just Natalia to add one thing you wanted to interject, and I will invite.
Yes, only one sentence. Like previous summer during the COVID, I spent mostly in the Jewish cemetery, working on the project of the hiding place inside the cemetery, and I was so astonished with this whole coalition with the people having a different tools, from archaeologists to the specialists with the nature, and how the people gather together and they help the cemetery to clean the cemetery. Of course, we have Michał Laszczkowski. It's really amazing, and I think it's supposed to be this kind of tool for us, how this interdisciplinary approach is actually working in a very difficult space, like as a Jewish cemetery in Warsaw. So yeah, my congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you, Natalia.
Not me, but thank you.
Thank you. I would like to invite Director Puchta, Director of Foundation for the Preservation of Jewish Heritage in Poland, and also speak as as Vitek mentioned, there is the coalition of the guardians of the cemeteries, and FODZ is also part of this. What are other strategies that we're trying to implement and that we're trying to achieve?
Good evening, good morning, good afternoon. I would like, first of all, to express our sincere gratitude for partners that joined the discussion today. I believe that your input and the sharing of your experience is something that really is important for FODZ as a foundation, but also for other partners that are on board many projects with us. Concerning the statements that were already raised here, I truly believe that the role of the synagogue is as a witness not only to the destruction process, but also to the to the community that was living and building those houses of Jewish architecture. Of course, for people in Poland, it has also a double meaning. It not only shows the richness of Jewish presence and of Jewish heritage in Poland, but it also has a strong effect in small towns, villages, for people to understand where they are living, what was the past, what was the past that joined different communities. And also what is important for them to understand how to build for the prosperous future. In order to understand also how we can move forward with various projects, I believe that what Witold mentioned, the Coalition of Guardians of Jewish Cemeteries in Poland, is something that we can build on, something that is very important for people who have private initiatives, who are acting like volunteers, to understand that they are not alone, that there is some structure standing behind them that is not only recognizing what they are doing, but also is in a situation when there is a need to help them. Of course, as Witold has mentioned, this is only a beginning of this project. We hope very much that we will be moving forward in order also people who are living outside of Poland to understand the dimension of the private individuals and volunteers who are involved in this endeavor. Also, I would like to refer to what Natalia has mentioned, that this is something that is very important for the synagogues. Those private initiatives, they are first of all aimed at overcoming the general neglect. In many places during the years after the Second World War, people were just forgetting the past, and they were not able to comprehend what happened. And sometimes they are doing this with a hidden aim, but in many cases, this was just due to lack of knowledge. And I believe that with those initiatives, those private initiatives, this is something that we can really build on. As to the synagogues, few examples were mentioned already here. In my opinion, the most important factor in preserving the buildings of synagogues is to gain some kind of ownership from the local community, whether it is a local association like in the case of Płock, whether it is from the mayor, like in the example that Natalia has mentioned. This is absolutely the first step to gain their acceptance for some kind of a joint project. Excuse me. Not only because they are there with a lot more resources than we are standing in Warsaw with, but also because they really understand the needs of the local population. And I believe the first starting point is to learn how those how those buildings could be used for to answer the needs of local communities, local people. We have gained already few examples, like in the case of synagogue in Przemyśl, or in the case of synagogue in Ziembice, where the local authorities are really not standing by, and they really want to find some kind of a solution for this type of activities that can lead to opening of the doors of the synagogues to some cultural events, some endeavors that reach out to the local population. Concerning the factors affecting the preservation, I would like to mention also what is important is the interest or the dedication of local volunteers. This is something that is gaining momentum now. And a good example of this is example of the synagogue in Orla, where the local volunteer was nominated to the Pauline Prize this year. But what is important is that his personal involvement in preservation of the synagogue gained interest also from academic institutions like the Arts University in Poznań and the Białystok Polytechnic, and also from international partners, namely the Foundation for Jewish Heritage operating from the UK. So I believe that the role of FODZ is to be a partner that will bring all those individual interests together and will be able to create some kind of a project that will, first of all, lead to overcome of general neglect, then will lead to finding a purpose of this building to function in the future, because we need to understand that with the 300 synagogues that are still standing in Poland, we cannot be in a position to open so many museums. But I believe that with many individual ideas coming from the local municipalities, we are able to join a common effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. I am just typing in right now the address of our project site. You will be able to visit and explore the synagogues and the cemeteries and also watch the recordings of our 3 webinars soon as this one needs to be still uploaded, but they will be available on the site. And as we're closing soon, I would maybe give 5 minutes to our audience. If you have questions, you can type them in the chat or in question and answers. I can see one. Natalia, if you're reading, this is for you. But if there's a question to our panelists, please type it now. I will type the address.
Yes, I will. It was the question for Maria. I will share my email for sure. And maybe one thing, if I may add, what Piotr said already. I think also this coalition of the body in the terms of building, like renovation of the synagogue, the relic synagogue. We really need this academic critical approach. We need really designers, local community, and also really checking the needs of the, in the local shtetl or the town. It's so important, because without this, it's kind of, the project is melting. And I remember even, more than 35 trips to Chmielnik, and still speaking with the local community, and also from the people from Israel, from United States. So then really we achieve this critical mass. And how the synagogue will operate between different cities, what will be the public program. So I think this is also the discussion for a union of the Polish architects and the designers, and would be amazing if the young architects could approach in a future discussion or conference about the tools that we actually have in our hands, but still we need to talk to each other, and especially with the historians, with the Jewish heritage. And yeah.
Thank you, Natalia.
I'll just chime in with something. Nobody has mentioned money in this webinar, and synagogues cannot be restored without financing. 30 years ago, when I started out in this field, you could get somewhere with $50,000, but you can't get very far with $50,000 today. And if you're going to restore a synagogue, as far as I see it, there are 3 main things that you need. You need financing, you need money, you need to know what it's going to be. You need to know the use, like what Piotr said. You need to know what it's going to, why you're restoring it, what it's going to be. And you need to ensure sustainability. You can't just restore a synagogue and expect it to stay pristine or whatever without some mechanism to keep it that way. Same with Jewish cemeteries. You can restore a Jewish cemetery, but with one wet June, the grass will be waist high and weeds will be waist high again. And if you fence off a Jewish cemetery with some of these very high fences that some of the organizations are putting on, it's very easy to forget about it. And anything can go on behind that fence. It can be ghettoized and, sort of divorced from the local scene and local community. So all of these things are important, but building takes money, and there are not that many financing organizations these days. It really falls, the big money comes from the EU, the Norwegian fund, the city's government, something like that. It's very hard to find private sources that can raise the amounts of money that are necessary to restore a big building. And that's a big problem.
Yes, thank you, Ruth. And as I was showing some of the synagogues, I was also turning to that. There's a need for large sums of money to invest in these buildings in order to save them. And there are also questions: how many of them can we realistically save, as this kind of work is very expensive. And as you've mentioned, Norway grants, that's what enabled us to save Zamość, for example. Local authorities also were helpful with the Olsztyn case. Yes, but there needs to be much more effort done, and also priorities have to be made. What are we doing, where, and how these places can later survive and support themselves? Yes, Director Puchta.
I fully agree with what Ruth has said, that money is the most important threshold. This is why I assume that we will not be able to preserve in physical form all the 300 synagogues. This is why also from my perspective, the cipher modeling is a tool that will also preserve those synagogues for next generations. Because I believe if we do the screening of the synagogues, and also there are some already running projects that aim at totally reconstructing the buildings that do not exist anymore, but they are in a way answering the needs of future generations to be able to at least see what magnificent buildings those were. So from my point of view, I will also support those projects that are developing in the cyberspace, in the so-called virtual reality, not only from the perspective of COVID and difficulties to travel, but also for preserving those objects for future generations.
Yes, I'm just yes, I'm also seeing a question from participants and raising the importance of money, and also the question who should and could pay for the renovations. And I think what we were discussing is that we're all, whoever is related to this heritage, whether living in Poland or living outside of Poland, this is a joint interest, joint treasure and responsibility, and hopefully we can find ways to cooperate to save this these places, at least some of them. I would like to thank you all for listening to us, for being with us, and thank the panelists for their insights. Yes,
Marta, one more, because there is an important question about the reunions of descendants of Jewish communities.
Yes, can you read it out?
Dan Oren is mentioning the examples of Lublin and Tarnów. I believe that we have already witnessed many more reunions like this. For next year, we are planning, hopefully it will work out, reunion in the city of Kałuszyn and in the city of Nowogród, and we have full cooperation on those reunions with the local mayors.
Can I make one more point? I think, we all deal with Jewish heritage, and we sometimes deal with it alone within the Jewish heritage world. But I think it's worthwhile to branch out and to cooperate and to collaborate, or at least to learn from organizations that are dealing with other religious heritage. And I think there are two that could be of interest and of value to people dealing with Jewish heritage in Poland. One of them is the network, the Future for Religious Heritage, which is based in, I think, Amsterdam. And it's a network of activist institutions, individuals who are engaged in preserving all religious heritage and abandoned religious heritage, because there are thousands of abandoned churches in Europe. And they deal, and they have a lot of ideas come out of this this network about how to use buildings and how to get financing, but how to use them. Another one is the Association of Significant Cemeteries in Europe. And until a couple of years ago, they had no Jewish cemeteries in this association. But they also have the same sorts of problems that that Jewish cemeteries have. It's for different reasons. It's for dwindling congregations or something, or demographic shifts. But for example, the Highgate Cemetery in London has similar problems with vegetation, with how to deal with visitors, with all sorts of things like this, as any big city cemetery like Okopowa has. So I think it's worthwhile to start engaging with these organizations in order to branch out and to get these organizations to recognize Jewish heritage, which was basically off limits to them until quite recently.
Thank you. Thank you. These are all amazing, inspirational ideas, and let's just get to work again. And we invite everybody to join us in this work. You're welcome to email us and support us in any way you'd like to, and in any way you can. I am officially saying goodbye for a while. This is the third and final webinar in this series, hopefully till next one. And we will keep you posted about any potential webinars in the future. Thank you very much for being with us, and see you in the preservation community, Jewish heritage preservation community. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.